How's that? Sound check, sound check. Welcome, welcome, everyone. I'm praying that my voice can be as restful and as easy listening as Dennis's voice when he gets in the mode of introducing us into the meditative state. So, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming this evening, adding your flame to this place. I want to thank Dennis for extending me the courtesy and distinct privilege of being able to share with you a little bit about my spiritual path, my relationship with the masters. So let me just give a little short invocation to acknowledge the presence of the sponsoring gurus and masters of this Temple of Clarity, and also welcome and acknowledge the presence of many angels and those who assist all who come here. And I am asking that the overshining presence of my sponsoring masters and those who inhabit this place can magnify and use this presentation to touch the hearts and souls of those here tonight and those who may even listen to this in another time or space. So Dennis has asked me to just give a short bio of myself and I'm going to keep it in close context of my spiritual path, my induction into spiritual teachings. And it all started with my mom. My mom was brought up a very proper household as a Presbyterian in Philadelphia. And when she got married, she determined with her new husband that she was going to bring up any children she was blessed with in a proper Christian home and proper upbringing. However, by the time she had her children, she was definitely not getting all the answers she was seeking to get from her Presbyterian minister. And so it could be said she was a very enthusiastic seeker by the time my sister and I arrived in the household. So what did that mean? That meant that her kids were sent off to a number of different Sunday schools as she was trying to find out what was compatible with her version of Christianity. So I ended up in Sunday school at a Baptist church. I think we had a short stint with the Mennonites, which are related to the Amish. This was in the eastern part of Pennsylvania. I think my mom even had a little Quaker background. And so our family ended up moving. My father's job, he was transferred, and we moved next door to a family that was involved with a particular denomination that we never heard of. Perhaps some of you or someone, is anyone familiar with the name Emmanuel Swedenborg? Okay, so we do have a number of people nodding their heads yet. So yeah, we're kind of in an esoteric, mystical crowd here. Well, these neighbors were Swedenborgian. And my mother, on meeting the lady of the house, was invited to attend some of the services. And before too long, their actual main church was about 20 minutes away from where we lived. And they had a church school there, an academy. And my mother, in consultation with my dad, who kind of went along with my mom was kind of she wore the pants in the house as far as the religion that's practiced. She sent us off to this academy. So the requirement of a student at this academy is you go to chapel every morning, and also a part of the curriculum is to study the teachings, the doctrine of Swedenborg. And this was being grounded in a foundation of the true Christian religion. That was one of the major themes of his doctrine and his teachings. And so I took away from that experience. I was there grades 9 through 12. First of all, I was introduced to the concept or the principle that there is such a thing as progressive revelation. Emmanuel Swedenborg was not passed off as just a theologian, but as a revelator or a messenger. The term we might use today is a messenger, an anointed messenger. And so that was a very important principle. And then also, I was introduced to the concept that there is a spiritual path that we're required through free will. We can make a free will choice to walk a path. And in Swedenborgian terms, it's the path of regeneration. Okay? My later teachers, they use the term the path of initiation, or more lately, we're using the term a path of light that leads to the ascension, the process of the ascension. So I also left this school with the idea that, oh, by the way, Swedenborg lived in the 1600s. So he was a 17th century prophet. And so both my mother and I, unlike many people in the community of the Swedenborgian church, we felt that, well, if there was a revelator back in the 17th century, who is the messenger today? Who's the contemporary messenger? That community, many people, Swedenborg was it. Like he was the equivalent of the second coming of the Lord. And of course, that's true in a certain aspect. So, little pause here to just catch up with my notes. So, leaving there, I, along with my mother, it was interesting. My mother would come across some teachings. She'd tell me about a book. And for a couple years after I got out of high school, into my college age years and all, we continued exploring different spiritual teachings. And one of the interesting things that, well, by this time I actually went up to work in the oil fields in Alaska. And I was making pretty good income as an oil field worker. And sometimes I would, the work was seasonal, and I'd have a chance to come down to California. And right around that time, I discovered Paramahansa Yogananda. I read the autobiography of a yogi, and then I found out about the Ananda community, and I had an opportunity to attend a workshop in Ananda, which is in the Northern California area. I'm sure you're familiar with that community. And I would say that was kind of leading up to the time when my mother sent me some books for my birthday, and they were written by Mark and Elizabeth Prophet. And these books were my introduction to the teachings of the Ascended Masters by the prophets, Mark and Elizabeth Prophet. And so fast forward, I ended up moving from Alaska and moved to their community. They were based in California. And right about the time I got involved with the Summit Lighthouse teachings, they were moving from California to Montana. And that was right around, for me, it was 1986, 1987, 1988. So I ended up moving to Montana in the community that was started around Elizabeth Clare Prophets and her followers. She had a staff by that time of maybe 500 or 600 people. And I lived in a neighborhood in the immediate vicinity. And Elizabeth Prophet was actively involved as a messenger for the Great White Brotherhood until around 1997, 1998. She ran into some health difficulties. She was having some cognitive issues, and it forced early retirement on her, basically. She was still relatively young. I remember being very, very questioning of why this was occurring. So there was a time between, say, 1998, 99, and 2004, 2005, when many of us who had been drawn to the Montana area were kind of wondering what's next. Our Guru Ma, was no longer on the scene. We weren't being informed fully on what was happening. The church leadership left behind in her wake had their own ideas that many of us didn't necessarily agree with. Well, it was right around that time that one of her ardent students by the name of David Christopher Lewis, it was in 2004, he had been on the Summit Lighthouse staff, was a student of Elizabeth Prophet, I think about 22 years up to that point, somewhere. And it so happened that the woman I was married to at the time was a good friend of David. And so David, among a close circle of friends, circulated some inspired messages that he said he was getting from some of the masters that we were all familiar with. And because I was married to a woman that was very close friends to David, it was very natural that I should be drawn into his circle of influence as well. And so that's marked the beginning of my involvement with what we know today as the Heart Center community, the Heart Center movement and activity. And I am still an active supporter and actually part-time staff, and I do some work, contributing work on their website. And it was around 2 or 3 years after David stepped forward with his new ministry that one of our ladies who was involved with the Heart Center introduced to us, the community, the master Omram Mikhail Ivanov, who really up to that time we were totally unaware of. I mean, I know I didn't know anyone that was familiar with his teachings. And so it was through the introduction of Omram Mikhail Ivanov and his teachings, we became also acquainted and introduced to his master, his guru, teacher, by the name of Peter Dunov, the master, spiritual master Peter Dunov. They were both born in Bulgaria. Peter Dunov spent his, not his entire life, but most of his ministry was in his native country. His, probably his chief or primary disciple, Omram, went to France, and that's where he brought forth most of his teachings. So the question I had hinted to earlier, does anyone know, well, first of all, does anyone know the name Peter Dunov? Master Peter Dunov. And what would you say, for those that are familiar with him, is he most famous for? Or what is the first thing maybe that you think of when you think of the Master Peter Dunov? The Panurhythmy, of course, the Panurhythmy dance. That is probably his most famous, lasting legacy. And many of you may know that Panurhythmy dance is practiced weekly at the Quest Haven Retreat, which is in San Marcos, very close to the San Diego area. Our beloved Dennis goes there quite frequently, almost every Sunday. And David Christopher Lewis, who is our messenger and pastor, he's very, very enthusiastic about the Panurhythmy as well. So at this point, I would like to, because I'm a content contributor to the Heart Center website, I was actually assigned, we have a number of different teaching pages and pages that are dedicated to specific masters. So we have a page about Elizabeth Clare Prophet, and of course Jesus and Saint Germain and many of the masters. Well, we didn't have a page dedicated to Peter Dunov. So I was assigned by David to put up a Peter Dunov webpage. And I didn't know much about Peter Dunov, so I used these two biographies as my reference text: Prophet for Our Times, edited by David Lorimer, and Life with the Master, Peter Dunov. which are reflections by Omram Mikhail Ivanov. And so I'd like to just, out of all the quotes, I mean, there's a lot. I whittled down to 2 quotes that are at the top of the page. Okay, this is a quote of the Master. I have come to reveal love, to bring love down to the earth. This is my mission. The only love which resolves all life's problems is divine love. The other kinds of love are also valuable, but they will be in their place only when the love of God remains in the center of human life. And this kind of opens up my theme for this evening, which I'm hoping I'm allowing enough time to get to. It's kind of a lead up. Okay, the Creator has given us a body for the physical world, a will, heart, and intellect for the psychic world, and a soul and spirit for the spiritual world. And we must work on them simultaneously by practicing the activities that correspond to their needs. So you'll notice he referred to 3 worlds: the physical world, the psychic world, and the spiritual world. And his dictum to his, well, he wrote in a letter specifically to Omram, his disciple at the time. He said, continue working in the 3 worlds. So that, I saw that highlighted. And as the theme of my talk this evening, what does the Master mean when he tells us continue working in the 3 worlds? So how many are familiar with the esoteric? It's actually a principle promulgated or brought forth by Hermes Trismegistus, as above, so below. The macrocosm reflects in the microcosm. Well, a corollary to that is as within, so without. Of course, what we're talking about is the reality of our inner world is reflected or mirrored in the reality of our outside conditions. And so if we have these 3 worlds within, and we're to work on them simultaneously, again, the physical, the psychic. Now, when he said psychic, he was including the major faculties of our being: the heart, the will, and the intellect. Now, what if the outer reflects the inner? What are the 3 worlds that are correspondential to the 3 worlds we have within? And I asked this of Lisa before the class, and she answered right away. And her answer was this: well, there's the natural world, or there's the nature spirits, or the elementals, or another term, which is a good one, is the nature kingdom, or the elemental kingdom. And then there's the kingdom of we humans, right? The human world. And then there's the angelic realm, or the angelic kingdom. So I would like to say that Peter Dunoff, as well as Swedenborg, and our own messenger, and many accomplished people that have, another one, Flower Newhouse, an angel, an embodied angel, if there ever was one, have the capacity to communicate with angelic intelligence, luminous beings, and they're able to communicate their messages, their teachings, their instruction, their guidance. So God sends these messengers to remind us that we can work with the three worlds within and the three worlds without. And really, there's the term 3 in 1, or the throne. And when you have the consciousness where you're able to integrate the three worlds within, in other words, why Peter Dunoff was referred to as a master, as that all the worlds within he had integrated, and he was magnificently accomplished in mastering his psychology. That's one thing that crops up time and time again amongst the Ascended Master teachings, is work on your psychology. Well, what that means is you're using your will, your heart, and your intellect to integrate. And also, psychic is the Greek word for soul. So your soul's relation to spirit is what we're working on. And you're preparing your soul for that alchemical marriage with spirit, as a bridegroom prepares herself for her groom. We prepare ourselves for our marriage with our groom, who is our Christ self, our Buddha nature. So let us together think. Because one thing that Peter Dunoff attempted to share with his disciples and have them follow us, engage them in practices that would allow them to work physically, using and working humanly in the psychic realm and in the spiritual. So that's what he meant by working in three worlds. So taking the panurhythmic dance as one of the preeminent examples. Panurhythmy, by the way, is set to music that Peter Dunoff composed. And Peter Dunoff's music is mellifluous, flowing, it's danceable, and it chimes with that otherworldly resonance of this music of the spheres. You can tune into his music, and the dance is a sacred circle. There are couples, pairs, or practicing 28 guided movements, coordinated movements. But what's so magnificent about the dance is that if you're comfortable with the moves, once the students become naturally flowing with the moves, they can start expanding their awareness of being outside in the nature kingdom, They're, of course, trying to be in syncopation with the other people that are walking in the circle. So you're trying to walk step by step in resonance, harmony, and through invocation of the word and through the toning of the word and through the awareness and consciousness of the participants, the practitioners, they're also conscious of the illumined ones or even the master himself and his ascended master causal body as the maestro, conducting all the proceedings, the panoply of the event and exercise. So what else here could we think of that provides such a beautiful way to bring together the three kingdoms? You know, all three, this collaboration of nature spirits, of our fellow brothers and sisters, and at the same time inviting the angels. So another example is our heart center services. When Todd asked about the rabbit, and Dennis's answer was, well, we invite in the animals kingdom too. And we very consciously do that. We have many beautiful songs and visuals where we're acknowledging and thanking them for their service to humanity because they're nurturing all the greenery and beautiful plants. There's these Davic spirits, Davic angels that have a similar relationship to the plants that the angels have to us. They're nurturing us, bringing us up, providing the thought form for our life form, and injecting the ideal for that plant to aspire to, as the angels do the same for us, to inspire us to outpicture our real self. Gardening can be a practice that, for those conscious outside, can invite the nature spirits and the Davic intelligence, luminous beings. I think of Findhorn. That was another teaching that came along. Findhorn is that community in Scotland where there's a lady that's Eileen Caddy, yeah, that can see the gnomes and the elves and the fairies. So here's a bonus insight for you all to finish up my talk. So we're working within, and we're seeing without the three kingdoms. But guess what? Just as the maxim or the dictum says, as above, so below, so within, so without. So if there's three kingdoms without, are there the three kingdoms within? And the answer is yes, indeed. Yes, indeed, there are. Perhaps unique to the Ascended Master teachings, I never run across it until I got involved with the Ascended Master teachings, is we have a body elemental. We have a little miniature replica of ourselves that helps to conduct, coordinate, regulate our metabolism. If you wonder about where some of the wisdom comes, that just without our even having to think about it, all these activities go on with inside our body. Well, can you imagine a little childlike likeness of yourself at the elemental level of being, helping to orchestrate and conduct the many activities of your body. So that's the elemental part. And of course, then there's all the levels of our own being. We're in the human form. And so we fulfill that part of it. But what then is the angelic part of ourselves that is also that third kingdom within? And that's our assigned guardian angel, right? We have a guardian angel that's assigned to us by the angel coordinators, the angel overseers. So the bonus perception of working in the three worlds is that we, when we work on ourselves, can recruit and elicit our body elemental to help us with our health, any issues or conditions we have. We can recruit our God-given faculties of heart, will, and intellect, and fashion our soul after the image of our higher spirit, which is our Holy Christ Buddha self, as we call it in the Heart Center. And on top of all that, we have this angel that is voting and helping us to achieve that victory of becoming our God-ordained real self. And I think I will just finish up with, that's why I have this here. We have a Peter Dunoff prayer that's part of the Paneurythmy prayers. And if I had thought ahead, I would have been able to circulate to it all. We could have said it. Oftentimes we say things 3 times, and we have a reference to the power of the 3 times 3. And so it says in the Paneurythmy prayers, we may attune to nature with this formula. And this formula is written by Peter Dunoff. And I'd like to suggest when you say it 3 times, you can say it for nature, but you can also say it for yourself and for the angels as well. So the 3 times 3, or you're covering the, and so it goes like this. O kindly, luminous beings, guardians of this place, thank you for your hospitality, and may God bless you. So you can say that once for the nature spirits. Say that once for all those of your brothers and sisters, including yourself, in the circle. And then you can say it for the kindly luminous beings that are overshining with the maestro, Peter Dunoff.
Thank you, Ken. I think we'll open it up to any questions you may have, but before we do, I do have a comment about the guardian angel being part of the 3 kingdoms, the inner kingdoms. The way I see it or understand it is that's a separate being and is not in the inner kingdom, but is assigned to us from the outer. It's an outer being. It could be the part of the missing part of the inner kingdom would be our own, what we have in common with the angels, which would be this God realization, this spark. But the angel itself, it doesn't really fit into that 3 kingdoms because the guardian angel is a separate being from us.
Yeah, that's certainly correct. That is certainly correct. And the only thing that I would say is that, we have a guardian angel that belongs to the angelic kingdom, but we also have the angel of our presence, meaning the presence of our higher self, which never left the angel kingdom. There's a part of us that's held in the immaculate state which God holds for us from the beginning. And so the angel of our presence still resides there. And our guardian angel introduces us to that angelic presence that is indeed our higher self. So, yeah, there's a little bit of a fine line, but you're certainly correct. All I am saying is that because we can be aware of having this guardian angel, this angel has been working with our life stream for many, many embodiments and knows us inside and out. Yeah. And probably won't be finished their assignment until we ascend, until we no longer have to come back to earth. And then they can move on to other assignments.
Yeah, I think the angel kingdom, they are much older than us, so we weren't even created, and they were just still managing the universe, and so that's probably very well true. Anybody else have any questions?
Well, by the way, thank you for clarifying that, if there was any confusion there. You're working with a separate being, for sure. But if you are aware of that relationship, it can be an internal impression. It can be an intuitive, projected thoughts. Many of the thoughts that you might have that are your better thoughts, could indeed be projections from your guardian angel. Or so some of your best moves can be directed or guided through an inner intuition. So I guess what I'm suggesting is the way that you work with this separate being is still a very inner experience.
Any questions? If anybody online would like to post a question on Facebook or on YouTube, go ahead. Let's see. We have Leslie, Vera, Christy, Patty, Claudia.
Wow. Whoa.
Who else is on?
I did want to say, too, just in kind of recognition and thankfulness for the women participants, I do want to, the major influences, I first mentioned my mother, and then also my wife, who she's an ex-wife now. Today is actually her birthday, and she was actually, they sung happy birthday to her on this morning's broadcast at this morning's Heart Center service. But it was because of her close friendship with David Christopher Lewis that allowed me entree into the Heart Center very early on. In fact, yeah, right at the get-go. And so I'm very grateful. We had 11 years of marriage, and that 11 years of marriage was at the essentially the birth of the Heart Center, and we were very closely knit with the nucleus of people that were launching the Heart Center at the time. So I feel very, very fortunate that my relationship led to such a great thing for my soul. Well, I tell you, I balance a lot of karma. I'll put it that way. I had the opportunity to balance a lot of karma, and I'm grateful for that. It's
just a couple insights that I had from your talk is, it was interesting about Swedenborg, and in Palos Verdes they have a wonderful temple, not temple, but it's a church. It's a Swedenborg that overlooks Palos Verdes Peninsula. Well, it looks over the Pacific Ocean, really, towards Catalina. Have you ever been there? It's in the really worth something to see, place to go. Really felt a divine presence there. And progressive revelation. I love that that word, because God is always expanding. And another thing that I noticed is that there are these moves of God. There are these new bursts that take place that when it happens, there is this burst of light, of fire, of inspiration, of the Holy Spirit, and many times miracles and healings and things like that. When these new things are birthed, these new organizations, whether it be Christianity or Buddhism, Swedenborgianism or whatever, the initial birth is always followed by a pulse of the Holy Spirit, which creates this new energy to bring it into reality. And like we're talking about the Summit Lighthouse and Mother, when she got sick and had an early retirement. She was still young, and we were all stunned by that. But there is a moment when, there is like a huge upswing of energy that the organization has. And when we reach the peak, maybe another organization will come. If the foundation of the first organization wasn't really able to keep it going in the future.
Well, maybe it was right for that time.
Yeah, I think it wasn't right for the time.
Right. Well, people are evolving in all levels on this planet. I mean, people can run a faster mile now. They can jump higher. They can have higher IQs. They can spiritually evolve. So we're evolving around the world. And so what may have been perfect for any, given time, then either it changes or another foundation springs forth, and then it takes off from there. It doesn't mean that anything's bad and wrong with whatever was for the time before. It was perfect for the time before, and then it just moves into another realm, so to speak. So I had a really interesting thing happen that I'm sure is related to all of this, but I don't quite know how. So about 5 days ago, I was just walking along, I think out of a store or into a store, and I heard this voice that said, "My name is Lori." That's really strange. My name is Lori. Who is saying that? I mean, and so when we started the meditation, I asked for that part of me, which seems like from another dimension or, higher level consciousness or whatever, to come down and explain to me exactly what it meant by that. And it came down and it occupied my entire body. It's still occupying my entire body. And pretty sure my name isn't Lori anymore. So not sure if we're going back to Uri, which is what the Divine Mother called me when I became an embodiment of her. It's the middle part of Lori, spelled U-R-I or you are me, meaning we are one. So it's somehow related to all of this. So thank you, Dennis, I think. Don't call me Lori anymore. Uri. Uri
Well,
is like O-O-R-E-E. It's the Hawaiian pronunciation.
I started wondering, because you were relating it to the content of my presentation, whether or not it was your body elemental trying to get noticed by you. But you're suggesting it's
It's
kind
definitely
of
a higher frequency.
an
It's a higher
oversoul or
frequency.
Yeah.
It's not just my inner child. I know that one well.
okay.
Who else? Do you want to come stand up over here and share with us?
Well, I just think that it's lovely how this progression occurred from, Peter Danoff was the son of a very strict pastor. I'm not sure I recall the religion.
He was a Methodist.
And,
Yeah.
old-time religion. And for him to take up this completely new teaching that was really out there was serious.
Oh,
His
yeah.
father wanted him to be a pastor.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it was like, you can't do this. This is, and that was the day when you did what your parents told you. We don't know about that anymore, right? But anyway, so then, anyways, our children didn't get the memo, right? And so then, our beloved Master Omron was, the disciple that emerged out of that entire movement. He had a lot of disciples. I'm sure you've seen those pictures of the Pandarithmi. Peter Knopf had a lot of disciples. And he was a young man, and he was handsome, and all the girls loved him, and he didn't, I don't know what point I'm getting to here. Anyway, the point is that, it evolved, and out of that has come, many other religions, not religions, I would say movements, spiritual movements, thinkers. And David Lewis is one of those, and we are very blessed to be part of it. So I just think it's just a really, rich heritage that we have to draw from. And the other thing I just wanted to say is he was talking about the angel of the presence may well be a unique being, an angel. However, we are striving for this oneness, with our God presence, with the angel of our presence, with our body elemental. And I find that for me, it gets too complicated. If I start thinking about all these different things, I just think about God in my heart and God around me and let it go with that. And the angels are fine with that because they're one with God. So that's something that works for me. I don't know. Maybe you benefit from thinking of that in a different term, but that's good. All is good. Whatever works. That's what we're here for. Each individual has to find their own path, and I prefer to just keep it simple.
Well, that's the beauty, too, is that it can be very simple as well. And I didn't spend a whole lot of time, but the whole idea is to integrate all the elements, find a union and find that oneness, and taking all these disparate elements and factors that make us up, which, if you get distracted or, it can get very complicated. And yet the measure is right here in the heart.
Yeah, I too like the inner child remembrance there. And we talk about the healing the inner child, the body elemental. Is that the same thing, the inner child and the body elemental?
My understanding is that it's not, that the inner child is actually our soul, but it's a soul that's obedient, the soul that is responsive to our Father, Mother, and in the ultimate sense, our Father, Mother, God. But the inner child, too, is at one level, I mean, I've even heard some of the teachings say that God can appear as a child, and that he often does. Yes. And so, you know, each one of us could have so many of our understandings. Inner child, to me, is that part of ourself that's the innocent God being that God visualized for us, and that because of our many involvements with the world and growing up an adult and the programming and all that, we tend to lose touch with. And those people that probably that are expressing an authentic oneness still with their inner child are the special people amongst us that teach us the way to go.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ken, as Ava calls you. We'll sign off now on this broadcast, and if you don't mind blowing out the candle and doing the closing prayer for us, we'll all stand with you. And Lisa, you made some snack, right?
I did.
So we have a little snack here waiting too, to reground us before we leave.
Okay, so I'm calling to the sponsoring masters and each one of our Holy Christ Buddhist selves and the magnificent solar presence of each one to bless this evening's sharing. May the Lord magnify this experience, and may each one find a golden nugget to help them on their path of light. Thank you, oh blessed ones. Thank you, masters.
Thank you, Mr. Ken. God bless you, everyone. We'll be broadcasting again tomorrow for the Divine Mother worship service. Please join us if you can. And also on Thursday for the Kuan Yin Rosary for World Peace. Good night.